The Great Hall of Station Aurelius was the largest room Kale Moran had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that clouds of light floated near the top, casting soft colors across the thousands of seats below. Delegates from 100 different worlds filled those seats, and Kyle sat among them, wearing the simple gray uniform of the Human Confederacy. He was 17 years old. He came from New Brisbane, a mining colony on a cold rock at the edge of human space. His father had died in a tunnel collapse 5 years ago. His mother worked double shifts in the refineries to keep food on the table. Kyle had taught himself everything he knew, using broken data tablets that he found in the waste piles. Now he sat in a hall filled with the children of emperors and queens, and he tried not to think about how far from home he was. The Galactic Youth Assembly happened once every 5 years. Young delegates from across the galaxy came together to compete in challenges of strategy, diplomacy, and problem-solving. The winners earned honor for their species. The losers went home with nothing but experience. Humans had never won. They had only been part of the galactic community for 200 years, which made them one of the youngest species in known space. Most of the other delegates came from civilizations that had existed for thousands or even millions of years. Kyle looked around the hall and saw creatures of every shape and size. The Krix were tall insects with sharp limbs and clicking voices. The Vardeshi were made of living crystal that chimed when they moved. The Morath were like walking trees, slow and ancient. And the Velanthari were the most powerful of all, with violet skin and silver eyes and a history that stretched back 12,000 years. The Velanthari had won the assembly for the past 47 cycles. Everyone expected them to win again. Princess Salith of the Velanthari Empire sat at the front of the hall, surrounded by her attendants. She was beautiful in the way that a blade is beautiful, sharp and dangerous. Her violet skin glowed faintly in the light, and her silver eyes moved across the room like she was counting her possessions. Kale had read about her before coming to the assembly. She was the third daughter of Emperor Veloth, educated in the finest academies, trained in diplomacy and war, and a dozen other arts. She had never known hunger or fear or doubt. She had never worked with her hands or worried about where her next meal would come from. She was everything Kale was not. The opening ceremony began with speeches from the assembly leaders. They talked about cooperation and understanding and the bonds between species. Kale listened carefully and took notes on his small tablet. The other human delegates, 2 young women from Earth named Sarah and Chen, whispered to each other about the different alien species they recognized. After the speeches, there was a reception. Delegates were supposed to meet each other and form connections before the challenges began. Kale walked through the crowd, nodding politely to those who looked his way. But he did not try to start conversations. He preferred to watch and listen. He was standing near a window, looking out at the stars, when he heard the voice behind him. So this is what humans look like up close. Kale turned. Princess Salith stood there with 3 of her attendants. Her silver eyes studied him like he was a strange animal in a cage. "Your Highness," Kale said, and gave a small bow. He had learned the proper forms of address before coming to the assembly. "How polite," Salith said. Her voice was sweet, but there was poison underneath. "Tell me, human, how does it feel to stand in a hall built by your betters? This station was constructed by my ancestors when your species was still living in caves." Kale did not respond. He simply looked at her and waited. "Your species builds with metal and fire," Salith continued, louder now. Other delegates were turning to watch. "How quaint. My ancestors were mapping the quantum foam, while yours were still discovering agriculture. We had already conquered 1,000 worlds when your first cities were being built from mud and straw." Some of the nearby delegates laughed. The Krix made a clicking sound that might have been amusement. A Vardeshi chimed softly. Kyle felt the heat rise in his chest. He knew what she wanted. She wanted him to get angry. She wanted him to say something foolish so she could mock him further. She wanted to show everyone that humans were primitive and emotional and did not belong among the great civilizations of the galaxy. He took a slow breath and let the heat fade. "Thank you for the history lesson, Your Highness," he said. His voice was calm and even. "I hope the assembly goes well for you." Then he turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard Salith make a sound of frustration. "Perhaps he lacks the cognitive capacity to understand insults," she said to her attendants, loud enough for Kale to hear. He did not look back. Sarah found him later, near the human delegation's quarters. Her face was red with anger on his behalf. I saw what happened, she said. That princess is horrible. Why didn't you say something back to her? What would I have said? Kale asked. I don't know. Something. Anything. You just stood there and took it. Yes, Kale agreed. I did. Doesn't it bother you? She called us primitive. She called our whole species primitive. Kale thought about the question. He thought about his father, who had died in a tunnel collapse because the mining company did not want to spend money on proper safety equipment. He thought about his mother, who worked herself to exhaustion every day. He thought about all the broken things he had fixed with his own hands, all the problems he had solved with nothing but his mind and his patience. Her civilization is 12,000 years old, he said finally. Ours is 200. She has had everything given to her since the day she was born. I have had to fight for everything I have. He looked at Sarah. When you have nothing, you learn to be patient. You learn to watch and listen and wait for the right moment. You learn that anger is expensive and silence is free. That sounds like giving up. No, Kale said. That sounds like learning. He went to his small room and sat on the bed. Through the window, he could see the stars, countless and cold. Somewhere out there was New Brisbane, where his mother was probably finishing another long shift. He had not come to the assembly to argue with princesses. He had come to learn. He had come to watch how the great civilizations solved problems, how they thought and planned and worked together. And he had come to show them, quietly and without words, that humans were not as primitive as they believed. The assembly would last for 1 month. There would be challenges and tests and competitions. Kale did not care about winning. He cared about understanding. Princess Seelith had mocked him, and he had chosen silence. But silence was not the same as surrender. Silence was patience. Silence was watching. Silence was waiting for the moment when actions would speak louder than any words. That moment would come. Kale was certain of it. The first challenge of the assembly was called the Zendari simulation. Every delegate knew about it because it had been used for hundreds of years to test the skills of young leaders. The challenge was simple to understand but very difficult to complete. Each team would be given control of a failing colony world. The colony had limited resources, broken equipment, and a population that was slowly dying. The team had to keep the colony alive for 100 simulated years while dealing with random disasters and problems. Teams were created by a computer program that mixed delegates from different species. When Kale saw his team assignment, he felt his stomach tighten. He had been placed on a team with Princess Seelith. The princess did not look happy about it either. When they gathered in the simulation room, she barely glanced at Kale before turning to address the rest of the team. There were 6 of them in total. Seelith and another Velanthari, a Crix named Chick, a Morath called Deeproot, a Vardeshi whose name sounded like breaking glass, and Kale. I will lead this team, Seelith announced. No one argued with her. The Velanthari had won this challenge for decades, and everyone expected her to know what she was doing. Kale found a seat in the corner and opened his tablet to take notes. The simulation began. The colony was located on a desert world with limited water and harsh storms. The population was 10,000 people of various species. They had basic shelter and food production, but everything was old and breaking down. Power came from solar collectors that were covered in dust. Water came from underground wells that were running dry. Seelith approached the problem like an artist creating a masterpiece. She designed complex systems that connected everything together. The solar collectors fed power to water purifiers, which fed the farms, which fed the population, which provided workers for the solar collectors. It was beautiful and elegant, a web of connections that showed the sophisticated thinking of Velanthari education. Kale watched and took notes. He saw what she was building, and he saw the problem with it, but he did not speak. The other team members followed Seelith's orders without question. Chick the Crix was good at organizing workers. Deeproot the Morath understood farming. The Vardeshi handled the technical calculations. The other Velanthari assisted Seelith with planning. No one asked Kale for his opinion. He did not offer it. By the 20th simulated year, the colony was thriving. The population had grown to 15,000. The farms were producing more food than they needed. Seelith smiled with satisfaction and began planning even more improvements. Then the solar flare hit. The simulation introduced a massive burst of radiation from the colony's sun. It was a random disaster, the kind that could not be predicted. The solar collectors overloaded, the power grid failed, and because everything in Salith's beautiful system was connected, the failure spread like poison through water. The water purifiers stopped working. The farms lost their irrigation. The population began to die of thirst and hunger. Salith and her team worked frantically to fix the problems, but every time they repaired one thing, something else broke. By the 43rd simulated year, the colony was dead. All 10,000 people had died, and the simulation ended with a harsh buzzing sound that meant failure. Salith stood frozen, staring at the screen. Her violet skin had gone pale. "Unacceptable," she said finally. Her voice was tight with anger. The simulation was flawed. The parameters were unrealistic. No colony would be designed with such vulnerability. "You over-engineered it." Everyone turned to look at Kale. It was the first time he had spoken since the simulation began. "Excuse me?" Salith's silver eyes were cold. 17 redundant systems for water purification, Kale said. He kept his voice calm and quiet, each one drawing power from the same grid. When the solar flare hit, they all failed together because they were all connected to the same source. You built a beautiful machine with a single point of failure. And what would a human have done? Salith demanded. The other team members watched in silence, their eyes moving between the princess and the human. "Buckets," Kale said. "Buckets and discipline." Chick made a clicking sound that was clearly mockery. "The primitive suggests buckets. Perhaps his species has not yet invented proper technology." Kale did not react to the insult. "When I was 12, he said, the water recycler in our housing block broke. We could not afford to fix it. So my mother organized the neighbors. Every morning, we walked to the central well and carried water back in buckets. Every evening, we collected the used water and filtered it through sand and cloth. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated. But we did not die of thirst." He looked at Salith. "You keep people alive first. You make it elegant later." The princess stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the room without another word. That night, Kale sat in his quarters and reviewed his notes from the simulation. He was not surprised by what had happened. He had seen the same pattern many times before. In the mines and factories of New Brisbane, complicated systems looked impressive, but they broke in complicated ways. Simple systems were boring, but they broke in simple ways that could be fixed with simple tools. There was a message waiting on his tablet. It was from Sarah. "I heard what happened in the simulation. Everyone is talking about it. The Velanthari are furious. Are you okay?" Kale wrote back. "I am fine. I just told the truth. Some people are saying you embarrassed the princess on purpose, that you were trying to get revenge for what she said at the reception." Kale thought about this. Had he been trying to get revenge? He searched his feelings and found only the same calm patience that he had learned growing up in the mines. "I was not trying to embarrass anyone," he wrote. "I was trying to help the team succeed." The princess asked what I would have done differently, and I answered honestly. He put down the tablet and looked out the window at the stars. He wondered if Salith was looking at the same stars, thinking about the same simulation. On the other side of the station, Princess Salith sat in her private chambers and ran the simulation again. She used the human's approach this time. Basic infrastructure, manual backups, simple systems that did not depend on each other. The solar flare hit in the 20th year. Just like before, the solar collectors overloaded. The power grid failed. But this time, the colonists carried water in buckets. They irrigated the farms by hand. They worked together, not because machines told them to, but because their lives depended on it. The colony survived. Salith stared at the screen for a long time. The simulation showed the population growing, slowly but steadily, year after year. By the 100th year, they had rebuilt everything that was lost. And they had built it better, because they understood what had gone wrong. She closed the simulation and sat in the darkness of her chambers. For the first time in her life, she had learned something from a species she considered primitive. It was not a comfortable feeling. She thought about the human boy, sitting quietly in the corner while she gave orders. He had seen the flaw in her plan from the beginning. He had known what would happen, and he had said nothing until she asked him directly. Why? Why had he not warned her? Why had he let her fail? She did not understand. But she wanted to understand, and that was perhaps the most uncomfortable feeling of all. The assembly continued with new challenges every few days. Salith watched the human boy more carefully now. She told herself it was because she wanted to understand his weaknesses, to find ways to defeat him in future competitions. But deep inside, she knew that was not the whole truth. The second challenge was a diplomatic negotiation. Teams were given a scenario where 3 civilizations were fighting over a planet rich in valuable minerals. Each team represented one civilization and had to negotiate a solution that gave them the best outcome. Kale was placed on a different team this time, representing a small trading federation. Salith represented the Velanthari Empire in the scenario, which was appropriate given her real identity. She expected the human to argue loudly and push for the best deal. That was what most delegates did. They made speeches about their civilization's needs. They threatened and promised and tried to dominate the conversation. Kale did none of these things. He sat quietly while the other delegates talked. He took notes on his tablet. When someone made a statement, he asked questions. Simple questions that seemed innocent but cut right to the heart of the matter. "You say your civilization needs these minerals for survival," he said to one delegate. "How long would your current reserves last without access to this planet?" The delegate hesitated. She had not expected to be asked for specific numbers. When she finally gave an answer, it showed that her civilization was not as desperate as she had claimed. "You say you have historical claims to this system," Kale said to another delegate. "But the records show your ancestors abandoned the planet 3,000 years ago. What changed to make it valuable again?" Again, the delegate stumbled. The question exposed the fact that they only wanted the planet because others wanted it, not because they had any real connection to it. By the end of the negotiation, Kale had not made a single demand for his own civilization, but his questions had revealed so many contradictions in the other delegates' arguments that they began arguing with each other instead of with him. When the challenge ended, his team had won a compromise that gave them significant access to the minerals without making any enemies. It was not the biggest win, but it was the smartest one. Salith found herself impressed against her will. The third challenge was an engineering problem. Teams had to design a bridge across a canyon using limited materials. The bridge that held the most weight would win. Most teams designed beautiful structures. The Vardeshi created something that looked like frozen music, all curves and elegant connections. The Velanthari built a bridge based on ancient mathematical principles, perfectly balanced and precisely measured. Kale's team built something ugly. The bridge was made of thick beams connected with simple joints. It had no curves, no elegance, no beauty. It looked like something a child might build with wooden blocks. "How embarrassing," one of Salith's attendants whispered. "The humans have no sense of design," but when the weights were added, the ugly bridge held more than any other. It held more than the Vardeshi bridge, which cracked at the joints. It held more than the Velanthari bridge, which twisted and broke under uneven pressure. It held so much weight that the testing machine ran out of things to put on it. "Simple geometry," Kale explained when asked about his design. "Triangles are stronger than curves. Thick beams break slower than thin ones. We did not try to be clever. We just tried to be strong." Salith thought about his words long after the challenge ended. The fourth challenge was a historical analysis. Each delegate was given records from a fallen civilization and asked to explain why that civilization had collapsed. Most delegates wrote long papers full of complicated theories. They talked about economic cycles and political pressures and cultural shifts. Their explanations were sophisticated and showed deep understanding of galactic history. Kale wrote 3 paragraphs. "The civilization fell because the leaders stopped listening to the workers," he wrote. "The records show that workers in the outer provinces sent many warnings about failing infrastructure and unhappy populations. The leaders ignored these warnings because the workers were considered low status, and their concerns were not important. By the time the leaders realized the danger, it was too late to fix." He ended with a simple statement. "Civilizations do not fall because of complicated reasons. They fall because powerful people stop paying attention to simple truths." The judges gave him the highest score. After the fourth challenge, Salith began to search for information about Kale. She used the Assembly's database to access records from the Human Confederacy. What she found surprised her. New Brisbane was one of the poorest human colonies. The mining companies controlled everything, and the workers had little power or protection. Kale's father had died because safety equipment was too expensive. His mother worked 16-hour days and still barely had enough money for food. Kale had educated himself using discarded tablets that he found in garbage piles. He had scored higher on the aptitude tests than any other human in the Confederacy. Not because he had better training, but because he had learned to think clearly and solve problems with limited resources. He had never attended an academy. He had never had a private tutor. Everything he knew, he had learned through his own effort and determination. Salith thought about her own education. The finest teachers in the Empire, the most advanced technology, libraries that contained the knowledge of 12,000 years. She had been given every advantage from the moment she was born. And yet this boy from a poor mining colony could match her in competition after competition. She began to watch him more carefully. Not with contempt anymore, but with curiosity. She noticed how he observed others before speaking. She noticed how he asked questions instead of making statements. She noticed how he never tried to impress anyone but always seemed to understand things that others missed. One evening, she found herself walking past the observation deck and saw him sitting alone, looking at the stars. She almost walked away, but something made her stop. "May I sit?" she asked. He looked up at her without surprise, as if he had expected her to come. "Of course, Your Highness." She sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Why did you let me fail in the simulation?" she asked finally. "You saw the flaw in my plan. You could have warned me. Would you have listened?" Salith opened her mouth to say yes, but the word would not come. She thought about how she had dismissed him, how she had ignored his presence, how she had assumed that a human could have nothing valuable to offer. "No," she admitted. "I would not have listened." "Then warning you would have accomplished nothing," Kale said. "Sometimes people need to fail before they can learn. I did not want to take that opportunity away from you." "That seems cruel." "Maybe," Kale agreed. "But it also seems honest. And I have found that honesty is usually kinder than comfort in the long run." Salith looked at him. This strange, quiet human who spoke so simply and saw so clearly. She had spent her whole life surrounded by people who told her what she wanted to hear. No one had ever let her fail on purpose so she could learn. "You are not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," Kale replied. They sat together in silence, watching the stars, as the galaxy slowly turned around them. The crisis came in the third week of the assembly, in the middle of the night cycle when most delegates were asleep. Kale woke to the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed in his small room, and a voice spoke through the station's communication system. Calm, but urgent. "Emergency. Atmospheric contamination detected in sections 7 through 12. All delegates must remain in their quarters. Security teams are responding." Kale got out of bed and pulled on his uniform. He had grown up in the mines, where emergencies happened regularly. His body knew how to move quickly without panic. The door to his room would not open. The computer said the security lockdown had sealed all passages to prevent the contamination from spreading. Through the small window in his door, Kale could see the corridor filling with a faint yellow mist. He recognized the smell instantly. Methane. Someone was flooding the station with methane gas. Most species in the galaxy breathed oxygen. Methane was poisonous to them. Only a few species, like the Cricks, could survive in a methane atmosphere. Kale understood immediately. This was not an accident. This was an attack. He looked around his room for anything he could use. The ventilation grate in the ceiling was small, but he was thin. He climbed on his bed, pulled off the grate, and crawled into the maintenance shaft above. The shaft was dark and tight, but Kale had spent years crawling through mine tunnels. This was nothing compared to the spaces he had squeezed through as a child, searching for valuable scraps in the waste piles. He moved through the shafts, following the emergency signs painted on the walls. He needed to get to the Environmental Control Center. If he could shut down the methane release, he could save everyone on the station. He dropped out of a shaft into a corridor and found himself face to face with Princess Salith. She was not alone. Several delegates from minor worlds were with her, huddled together in fear. The yellow mist was thicker here, and some of them were already coughing. "Human," Salith said. Her voice was steady, but Kale could see fear in her silver eyes. "How did you get out?" "Maintenance shafts," Kyle said. "We need to move. The methane concentration is increasing. Soon it will be high enough to kill anyone who breathes oxygen. The security bulkheads are sealed. We cannot reach the main corridors. Then we go through the maintenance level." Kale looked at the group. Can everyone climb? They could. Kale led them up into the shafts, moving through the darkness toward the auxiliary control room. It was the backup system for the station's atmosphere, old and manual, designed for emergencies exactly like this one. As they crawled through the tight spaces, Salith moved up beside him. "You know this station well," she said quietly. "I studied the emergency systems before the assembly started," Kale replied. "Habit from the mines. Always know where the exits are." "You expected something like this?" "I expected something. Emergencies happen. The only question is when." They reached a junction where the shaft split into 3 directions. Kale stopped to check the emergency signs. "Why don't you fight back?" Salith asked suddenly. Kale looked at her. "What do you mean? When people insult you? Your species. You just accept it. You never argue or defend yourself." "Do I accept it?" "You never respond." Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your empire is 12,000 years old. Mine is 200. Every species in this assembly has been in space longer than we have had writing. You have all had time to make your mistakes, fight your wars, learn your lessons." He pointed down the left shaft. "This way." They continued crawling. Salith stayed close to him. "That does not answer my question," she said. "We are still learning," Kyle said. "Humanity, I mean. We are new to the galaxy. We do not know everything. We have not solved all the problems you have solved. So we watch. We listen. We learn." "That sounds like weakness." "No," Kale said. "That sounds like patience. There is a difference." They reached the auxiliary control room through a maintenance hatch. The room was small and dusty, filled with old equipment that looked ancient by galactic standards. But it was exactly what Kale needed. The control panel was manual, with physical switches and dials instead of touchscreens and voice commands. The Krix attacker had focused on disabling the main computer systems. He had not thought about the backup systems because they were so old and primitive that most species had forgotten they existed. Kale's fingers moved across the controls. He had never operated Velanthari equipment before, but the basic principles were the same everywhere. Air goes in, air goes out. Filters catch the bad things. Pumps move everything along. "You know what you are doing," Salith said. It was not a question. "I grew up fixing broken machines," Kale said. "Emergency atmosphere systems are the same everywhere. They have to be simple, or they fail when you need them most." He found the methane release controls and shut them down. Then he activated the purging system, which would pump clean oxygen through the station and push the methane out into space. The yellow mist in the corridor outside began to thin. Salith watched him work with an expression he could not read. "You saved us," she said. "You saved the entire station." "The station saved itself," Kale said. "I just pushed the right buttons. Do not pretend to be humble. You knew exactly what to do. You moved without hesitation." Kale finished the last adjustments and turned to face her. "In the mines, you learn to act quickly or you die. There is no time for doubt or fear. You see a problem, you fix it. If you cannot fix it, you find someone who can. If no one can fix it, you survive anyway. And if you cannot survive, then you die," Kale said simply. "But you do not give up before that. You fight until the last moment, with everything you have, even if everything you have is just your hands and your will." The security teams arrived a few minutes later. They found the Krix attacker in the main environmental control center, unconscious from oxygen exposure. He had been part of a radical faction that wanted to prove that different species could never live together peacefully. He had failed. That night, the station was buzzing with activity. Security officers interviewed everyone who had been involved. Medical teams checked delegates for methane exposure. Diplomats sent messages to their governments explaining what had happened. Kale sat alone in his quarters, too tired to sleep. There was a knock on his door. He opened it and found Salith standing there. "May I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside to let her enter. She looked around his small room, at the simple bed and the single chair and the tablet on the desk. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for saving us." "You already thanked me. I wanted to thank you properly, without others watching." She turned to face him. "I was wrong about you, about your species. I said you were primitive, but tonight you saved lives that would have been lost if we had relied on our sophisticated technology." "Technology is a tool," Kale said. "It is useful when it works. When it fails, you need something else. And what is that something else? Knowledge. Will. The ability to think clearly when everything is going wrong. He sat down on the edge of his bed. Those things do not require advanced technology. They just require a mind that refuses to give up. Salith was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I have lived my whole life surrounded by the greatest technology in the galaxy. I have never had to think about what I would do if it all failed. Now you know, Kale said. Yes, she agreed. Now I know. She left without saying goodbye, but Kale understood. Some things did not need words. He lay down on his bed and closed his eyes. Tomorrow there would be more challenges, more competitions, more opportunities to watch and learn. But tonight, he had taught something instead. He had shown the galaxy that humans were not just primitive newcomers stumbling through the stars. They were survivors. They were problem solvers. They were the kind of people who crawled through dark shafts and pushed old buttons and refused to die. And they were just getting started. The final ceremony of the Galactic Youth Assembly took place in the same great hall where everything had begun. The ceiling glowed with soft lights, and delegates from 100 worlds filled the seats below. 1 month had passed since the opening reception, but it felt like a lifetime. Kale sat in the back row with the other human delegates. Sarah squeezed his arm and whispered, You should be sitting in the front. After everything you did. This is fine, Kale said. I can see everyone from here. The ceremony began with speeches from the assembly leaders. They talked about the competitions and the challenges and the lessons learned. They mentioned the attack by the Crix Radical and praised the quick response of the security teams. They did not mention Kale by name, but several delegates glanced toward the back of the hall. Then it was time for the closing remarks. Tradition said that the highest-ranking delegate would give this speech. That meant Princess Salith. She walked to the podium at the front of the hall. Her violet skin glowed in the light, and her silver eyes swept across the crowd. She looked like everything Kale was not. Powerful, wealthy, connected, respected. The daughter of an emperor, educated in the finest academies, trained from birth to lead. But when she began to speak, her words were not what anyone expected. I came to this assembly knowing that my species was superior, she said. Her voice was clear and strong. 12,000 years of civilization. We have solved problems that younger species cannot yet imagine. We have arts and sciences and philosophies that span millennia. She paused. The hall was completely silent, and I have spent the past month learning from a human. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Delegates shifted in their seats. Several Velanthari attendants looked uncomfortable. Not because he taught me facts or techniques, Salith continued, but because he showed me something my civilization forgot long ago. Humility. The willingness to listen before speaking, to solve before conquering, to choose silence when silence serves better than words. She looked toward the back of the hall, directly at Kale. On the first day of this assembly, I mocked him. I called his species primitive. I said they were young and foolish, and had nothing to offer the galaxy. Her voice softened. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply returned to his work and let his actions speak for him. She stepped down from the podium and walked through the crowd. Delegates moved aside to let her pass. She walked all the way to the back row and stopped in front of Kale. I mocked you, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. On the first day, I called your species primitive. I remember, Kale said. You did not respond. No. Why? The entire hall waited for his answer. 1,000 eyes watched the human boy in the simple gray uniform. Kale thought about the question. He thought about his father, who had died teaching him that some battles were not worth fighting. He thought about his mother, who had taught him that survival required patience. He thought about all the insults he had endured, all the mockery he had ignored, all the times he had chosen silence instead of anger. Because you were not ready to hear the answer, he said finally. People do not learn from arguments. They learn from watching. So I decided to show you instead. Show me what? Kale stood up. He was not tall, not impressive, not powerful. But when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the great hall. The future does not belong to the oldest civilizations or the strongest empires. It does not belong to those with the most advanced technology or the longest history. It belongs to whoever is willing to learn. He looked at Salith, and then at the crowd beyond her. Humanity is 200 years old. We are young. We are small. We have made many mistakes and we will make many more. But we are learning. Every day, we watch the older civilizations. We study how you solve problems. We see what works and what fails. We take the best ideas from everyone we meet, and we make them our own. He paused. You think our silence is weakness. You think our patience is surrender. But you are wrong. Then what is it? Salith asked. Kale smiled. It was the first real smile he had shown in the entire assembly. It is adaptation, he said. Humanity learned long ago that the strongest species is not the one that fights the hardest. It is the one that learns the fastest. Right now, every species in this galaxy is teaching us everything we need to know. Your technology, your strategies, your strengths, and your weaknesses. He looked around the hall at the hundreds of delegates watching him. In 12,000 years, your empire grew to rule a sector of the galaxy. In 200 years, humanity has spread across dozens of worlds. We are not slowing down. We are speeding up. And every time someone calls us primitive, every time someone underestimates us, they give us another advantage. Because they stop watching us while we keep watching them. The hall was completely silent. Not even the cricks made their clicking sounds. Salith stared at him with an expression that mixed understanding with something that might have been fear. The silence was never submission, she said slowly. No, Kale agreed. It was observation. You were studying us. We were learning from you. All of you. Every species in the galaxy has something to teach us. We would be foolish not to pay attention. Salith was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the hall. She bowed to him, the princess of the Velanthari Empire, third daughter of the most powerful ruler in the sector, bowed to a human teenager from a mining colony. Then we had better start learning from you, she said, before you learn too much from us. Kale bowed back to her. I think that would be wise. The assembly ended soon after. Delegates returned to their homeworlds, carrying stories of what they had witnessed. The Velanthari talked about the human who had saved the station. The Cricks talked about the human who had defeated their brightest radical. The Vardeshi talked about the human who had built an ugly bridge that was stronger than their beautiful one. And everywhere, people began to look at humanity differently. Kale returned to New Brisbane. His mother met him at the spaceport, her eyes bright with tears she was too proud to shed. She held him tight and told him she was proud of him. I did not win anything, Kale said. You won something more important than a trophy, his mother replied. You made them see us. That night, Kyle sat on the roof of their housing block and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Princess Salith was returning to her empire. Somewhere out there, the delegates of 100 worlds were telling stories about what they had learned at the assembly. And somewhere out there, humanity was growing, learning, adapting. The galaxy had spent 12,000 years building civilizations. Humanity had spent 200 years watching and learning. The older species thought they were teaching the younger ones how to be civilized. They did not realize they were training their successors. Kale smiled at the stars. The future was coming, and humanity would be ready for it. All they had to do was keep watching, keep learning, keep silent, until the moment came when silence was no longer necessary. And on that day, the galaxy would finally understand what humanity had become. Not the students anymore, the teachers,